Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So rabbis all over the country, all over the world are going to be speaking this morning about Parasha Terumah. Many of them are going to tie in some way this particular parsha into how important it is to be there to support community, to give gifts to the community. I don't know of any capital campaign or fundraising effort in the Jewish community that doesn't somehow tie itself back into this week's parsha, because that's what Terumah means. A Terumah is a gift, it's a donation. You'll be happy to know that I will not be speaking about that today. Anybody who wants to give a gift or donation can speak to our treasurer, and I'm sure he'll be happy to help you with that. Instead, I actually want to talk about what all of this is going for, and actually challenge us to struggle a little bit with the idea of a Mishkan. Because we know, and this week's parsha is going to go into great detail about where these gifts are going to go and how this tabernacle, this Mishkan, is going to be built. We know it was, pun intended, the central part of the Jewish world for the people who are in the desert. But I struggle with this idea of the Mishkan a little bit. Because if you think about it, it's kind of what everybody else was doing at the time, right? If you were a follower of Zeus or a follower of Baal, and you wanted to go and to pray to your God, you were going to go to the temple of Zeus or to the temple of Baal. You were going to stand before their statue, their idol, and you're going to make your request. You're going to make your prayer. If we as Jews say that that's not what we do, that God is everywhere, why do we have a Mishkan? Doesn't it make sense to say, no, Jews, you can pray anytime, anywhere you want, anytime you want. Everywhere is a Mishkan. Well, that's not what it says here. It says, V'asu li mikdash v'shachanti betocham. We're going to look at that verse in a second. You will make for me a mikdash, a holy place, and I will dwell amongst you, or amongst them, if you're really being clear about the translation. So what do we do? How do we as Jews look at this concept of Mishkan and understand it from our worldview, not from the pagan worldview, not from the worldview that everyone else was sort of looking at it? Marge.
Well, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Okay.
Because there's something positive about people getting together in a space that you don't have to lose because you're now restricting the space and how you use it.
Like it. So Marge says, for those who are playing at our home edition, Marge says that don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? That there is something very positive about coming together, all together as a community, about focusing. There's something very positive about that. And we don't want to lose that by saying, well, just because that's what they do, right? And we're reframing the way we're looking at our theology. Good. Okay. Anybody else? Ooh, got lots of hands going up. I'll give it to the father of the bar mitzvah first. Bar mitzvah.
I think about it from the opposite perspective, as we all faced during the first summer months of COVID. Davening at home alone can be a very lonely and depressing experience.
Yeah.
Especially if you're saying the most Kaddish.
Yeah.
You're relying not on just 9 other people to say Kaddish, but to provide you with that necessary and critical emotional support, which you get a lot of times when you daven together.
Excellent. So I think you're following up, I think, on what Marge is saying here, which is we know better than most people after having survived through COVID that being alone, being in isolation, trying to do all of that and davening and bringing in Shabbat, it's lonely, it's depressing, it's not what we want to do, and there's something meaningful and powerful about coming together as a community. Okay, but by the way, this doesn't necessarily require you to come together as a community. If I made a mistake and I'm going to bring a guilt offering, a sin offering, I'm coming by myself. I'm going to the tabernacle. I'm making my offering. I'm going to the temple. I'm making my offering. It's true, there are some Kohanim there. There's some priests that are there that are going to help me through this, but it isn't a lone thing. It doesn't require community. So we're still struggling with this a little bit. Brianna.
I think if it was really about the Mishkan, I would say B'Shatanti B'Tocho, not B'Tocham.
Good.
And so it's hard for us to think abstractly. So maybe the Mishkan is more for us to get that kind of there.
So Brianna is correctly looking at the grammar of this, right? That if God were just saying, build for me a sanctuary so I can dwell in it, it would be in the singular. V'shachanti b'tocho, or b'tocha. B'tocho, right? It's the masculine. So, but b'tocham, right? It engages the people. That's clearly what it's talking about. The people that are there. So there's got to be some aspect of this that is for the people, not for God. So what else? What's the benefit?
I like what Brianna said about the grammar. Also, the asuli is the plural too. So he wasn't specifying one person or even Am Yisrael like as a singular. As the asuli, each person, and he's saying at the beginning, each person gives what his heart and it's in his heart to give or something. So it's like they all kind of have skin in the game, like, including Calvin's skin some.
Yeah, right.
But they do. They all have a stake in this.
So there's no doubt. I mean, part of this, and this is where we go back to the fundraising campaigns and capital campaigns, right? Everybody's got to have a piece of this, right? It's not about one or two people. It's not about one or two people have the ownership, but this is a place for everyone. So maybe, right? If we're at home, as Josh was saying, right? If we're at home, some of us have Sidurim, and some of us have a place that is conducive to davening and things like that, and maybe others of us don't. And so by creating a place where everyone sort of has ownership of it, it's theirs, then everyone can go there. It kind of it is that place that everyone can participate in. It's that place that everyone can be in and engage in all of this.
I was also going to add to that, like, it's also a makom kadosh and a makom kavua. So it's like for that particular purpose. Like, yeah, you could sit at home and you could daven in your pajamas and have your coffee and everything while you're there. But you come here and it's like, I'm not wearing my pajamas. Like I have to like, am I
Yeah, it forces you to create a different mindset, right? I mean, we know, and I'm not calling anybody out on this, but yeah, there were a lot of people during COVID, during the high holidays, that were watching, the high holiday services in their PJs and having that extra cup of coffee on Rosh Hashanah, not on Yom Kippur, but maybe, and it is a different mindset when you have to get up and you have to go somewhere and you're going to say, I'm now going to Shul. I'm now going to the Mishkan. It creates that sense of purpose, right? Or it at least crystallizes and solidifies, concretizes that sense of purpose of, now that's what I'm going to do. For all of us, I mean, you can make the same argument, by the way, for those people who work at home. Right? You have to be very disciplined if you're working at home to work versus not work. It's so easy for me to say, well, I'm at home. Okay, while I'm doing this, okay, I'll do the laundry also. Or, I'm hungry now. We don't really have anything. Okay, I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to run to Ralph's and I'm going to go buy something. Right? And we get all these distractions. Whereas when I'm here at work, when I'm here at shul, I'm not thinking about anything else. This is what it is. And so perhaps that that change of place, that creating of a place helps to create that mindset. Good. Anybody else? Yes. Excellent. Excellent. So, I mean, you tied it into the fact that they were slaves, and there's this transition that was happening, which is really important. And the modern commentator, Cassuto, writes as follows: in order to understand the significance and the purpose of the tabernacle, we must realize that the children of Israel, after they had been privileged to witness the revelation of God at Mount Sinai, were about to journey from there and thus draw away from the site of the theophany. Theophany is just a fancy term for God revealed God's self there. That moment at Mount Sinai must have been incredible. I mean, think of the best concert you could ever possibly imagine and then make it even better, right? It had everything. It had everything. It had the music, it had the sounds and the light show, it had all the special effects, and then as you know, the main piece, you're hearing God's voice in all of this, right? It was the best concert ever could have happened. Well, as you go away from that, what happens? You go, boy, that was a really good concert. You forget about it, or on the other hand, it's like, I really like that. I got to go get their album, right? Because I want to, and as I play the album, what happens? You remember the concert, right? I don't see a couple of my fellow Rush fans in here right now, but I'm a Rush fan, right? I went to a lot of their concerts growing up, right? I listened to Moving Pictures, right? One of their albums, and I remember that concert that I was there at. I remember what it felt like. I remember a little bit what it smelled like. It's a different issue, right? I remember that concert. And so by having the Mishkan there and going to it, maybe it's doing sort of the same thing. Maybe it's the album after the concert, right? And in their case, it wasn't just, oh, I want to remember that, but you've got the fear factor now of the abandonment of, well, God was there. Is God still here now? That need to have God's presence in the room is so powerful. It is so powerful. We know God is always there. But when you can bring God's presence into a place, it elevates it. That intentionality, that's why we say brachot. It brings God into that moment. For those of us who've had experience with hospital chaplaincy and those sorts of things, being in the room with somebody who is ill, doing Bikur Cholim, brings God into that moment. It changes everything. Mark. I like that. That's very interesting. What Mark said is that the Israelites weren't the only one who left Egypt, right? They left with an Erev Rav. They left with this mixed multitude of people with different traditions, and this was a way to sort of bring everybody to that same playing field, that same level of working together in developing their relationship with God. Okay, please. Please. Yes, so there definitely is this desire that God has for us to come together and be as a community. The challenging piece to that is it for God or is it for us, right? It could be both. One of the other sources I have here is from Sefer HaChinuch from the 16th century that says, "Know, my child, that any commandment that God requires of humankind comes only out of God's desire to benefit us." Right? God's command to build the tabernacle is for us to be there. It doesn't come out of God's need to dwell in an earthly place. So this, like a good parent, right, who sets rules, it's, yes, to some degree, we as parents need to have some order in our house. We need to do that. But the reality is, these rules that we set for our children, these patterns that we set for our children, the hope is that it's going to allow them to grow into the people that they are supposed to be, right? It benefits them.
I think very apropos today to celebrate Abigail's role in our tradition, this is another opportunity for us to bridge from them to them. And without that physical space, it's difficult as parents to establish examples for our children of the door by door. And I think this is another opportunity in the desert as we're going from literal place to another. This helps along that path.
I love that, bringing that into Abigail. Abigail, that's your charge. That's your rabbi charge right there. He just did it. Yes, we create those patterns of behavior to set the example, right? To set those rhythms, to set the example for us. That's part of who we are as Jews. I'm gonna give one more comment, and then I'm gonna change it at the end, give it a little twist.
Well, I think the last one just kind of, was my last comment, sort of sums everything up, where they say, don't think of it as Bani, like the children of, but Boni, the builders. And here they are, like, literally building, they're going to whatever their Home Depot or Lowe's was, getting their planks and their rings and putting their stuff together.
Right.
And literally building it and then building it for the next generations. And like I know, for example, like if I go to Greensboro, North Carolina, and I go to Beth David Synagogue, my grandparents, I'll have them tell, donated the cornerstone. And it says right there, donated by Edith and Rabbi David. And I'm like, wow, like I have part in this.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't donate it, but like this is like my family. And just when it's the whole door to door thing.
Right. It's not just you. It's now you and every generation that follows you has that connection.
Right, and they were founders, and like I tell my children, like your grandparents founded the synagogue, and it's important to what you're saying about role modeling and all that.
Excellent. So let me ask you a different question to think about, which is, what if we translate this verse differently? And we translate it in English, not build for me a tabernacle and I will dwell among them, but build for me a tabernacle and I will dwell within them. Because bitocham could also be translated as within them. Now what do we make of it? Now what do we do with that? It changes the way that we see the community coming together to build this. Yes, everyone comes together, everyone participates, not because it's going to create this magnificent structure, but because by doing so, it opens a space within each and every individual that participates to let God in. That's a whole different way of looking at this particular pasuk, at this particular verse. We do these things to not necessarily just be there for the community, but we also do it for ourselves. And the fact that it's unclear as to what is being said here, and both meanings are possible, is a sign to me of the brilliance of our tradition. Because I think both things can exist at the same time. And I think both things are being taught here. Yes, we come together as a community to build a place that we can have this bat mitzvah. But we also, in doing that, in participating, create a space in ourselves for God and our tradition to have a place to land, to be, that foothold, that first step. It doesn't happen without us finding a way to make that space. And for me, that has always been one of the most important lessons of this week's Parsha, is that each of us need to find a way to make that space in ourselves. Otherwise, we know it's not going to be there, right? We know in today's day and age, in the modern world, we don't make time, we don't make space for the things that are important. They don't exist. We don't make space and time to be with our spouse, to be with our kids. We're not going to. We don't make time to learn and to grow. It's not going to happen. We don't make time to take care of our health. It's not going to happen. We don't make time to make that spiritual connection, to let God in, to work on that relationship as well. It's not going to happen. Vasuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, make for me a holy place within yourself, so that I, God, can dwell within you. It's a different way to look at this, and a different imperative as we step forward on this particular Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.